Greetings, friends. Today you will learn about the terrifying conflicts that erupted in the galaxy and forever altered the fate and visage of the Imperium. We begin with the large-scale civil war among the followers of the cult Mechanicus that occurred on Mars. Even before the start of his rebellion, Horus understood that he could not succeed without well-tuned channels for the supply of weapons and ammunition, as well as the technologies that only the tech priests of Mars could provide. Thus he hastened to secure their support in exchange for what they valued above all else: knowledge. Relations among the various magi of the Red Planet had always been difficult, but now the tension within the Martian priesthood was rapidly increasing as news of the rebellion reached them. Rumors of espionage and outbreaks of violence against forged cities, which serve as the socio-political units of Mars, began to spread. Even more terrifying were the speculations concerning the Collegia Titanica units quartered on the surface, as there were fears that these forces had already secretly chosen a side in case war came to Mars. But no one suspected that long before the Horus heresy began, within the confines of the Forge of Mondus Gamma, developments were underway for a mechanism possessing a mind of its own. The Emperor himself had placed a veto on research in this area, for he knew self-thinking machines would wage war against humanity, as had happened in the past. However, the heretic Lucas Krom, greedy for forbidden knowledge, neglected the laws of the Imperium. Magos Ravachol, who was involved in programming doctrinal plates, was drawn into the project. But when the adept began to suspect the true aims of his work, Lucas Krom disposed of him. The Kaban machine is an intelligent robot of spherical shape, 10 meters tall, with weapon arms resembling mechadendrites in place of its arms. Its array of weaponry was fearsome, as the purposes of its arsenal were not fully understood. Its spherical body was situated upon a tracked platform and equipped with personal void shields. Despite all efforts by Lucas Krom to keep his activities secret, information continually leaked beyond the forge. Perhaps unrest was avoided due to support from Fabricator General Kelbohal. Yet each time a rumor about the project passed through data channels, the machine spirits whispered the name of a god from ancient myths, sounding as Horus. Some loyalist magi suspected that within the Forge of Mondus Gamma, something was being constructed for the War Master. Ultimately, Krom unleashed the might of his creation upon the reactors to test the machine's capabilities. Much of the resistance the Kaban machine faced was annihilated, and then it was spotted by one of the Knights of Tyrannus and attacked. The machine mysteriously disappeared after the reactor explosion. By the time the envoy of the War Master named Regulus arrived at the Forge of Kelbohal, clandestine renegade agents were already operative on Mars. The Fabricator General himself was discontented with the alliance with Terra, as Mars had effectively transformed into a vast arsenal factory serving the needs of the Great Crusade. Kelbohal remembered the ancient times when the Mechanicum declared war on Terra's tribes, and dispatched a military expedition to humanity's homeworld to seize the abandoned repositories of ancient citadels, with the intent to wrest secrets from the ignorant hands of those who remained oblivious to them. However, upon the remnants of ancient science, the Emperor had already constructed his realm and was unwilling to share anything. He decimated the Martian forces and drove them back to the Red Planet, then appeared on Mars himself as the Omnissiah and Peacemaker with a colossal army at his back. The peace offered was an illusion, a ruse cloaking a grim truth. With one hand, the Emperor offered alliance and prosperity, while with the other, he held a dagger behind his back. Accepting Terra's ultimatum, Kelbohal managed only to secure autonomy, and Mars became a vassal planet. Magos Regulus delivered 2 samples of standard template constructs as a gesture of Horus's goodwill. But this was insufficient, despite the valuable information they contained. At that time, the Fabricator General was already closely collaborating with Horus. Through secretive logistic channels, the War Master's allies received valuable equipment first and foremost, and at covert shipyards, 3 Abyss-class battleships were being constructed, destined to proceed to ultramar. Yet now, further steps were required from the tech priesthood. Then Envoy Melgator voiced at the assembly a thought that neither Kelbahal nor his ally Lucas Crom would dare to articulate. What more can the War Master offer? As confirmation of his camaraderie. And Regulus declared that Horus Lupercal lifted all restrictions on the research of forbidden technologies and also permitted the opening of the vaults of Moravec, where warp-corrupted tech artifacts rested. By opening the forbidden vault, Kelbahal absorbed the unnatural scrap code and was reborn. This moment is considered the birth of what is called the Dark Mechanicum. Soon, the scrap code spread across Mars, and even the orbital communication was disrupted. A period of widespread confusion ensued, which the Fabricator General and his allies used to mobilize their forces. Beneath the majestic peak of Mount Olympus, the Fabricator General watched as columns of Praetorian battle servitors marched out of the vaults of Moravec. They moved in various ways, some on tracked bases, others on thudding metal struts or broad rubber wheels, while some remained on human legs. Thousands of augmented warriors ready to fight for Horus filled the machine hangar. The armed servitors emerged colossal, muscular, clad in black multi-layered armor resembling charred flesh, their convex backs bristled with serrated spikes. Some soldiers lacked mouths, but streams of scrap code emanated from built-in augmitters, the hymn of the new Martian power. Others, adorned with intimidating bronze masks, issued the same sounds from bloodied lips, grinning in cruel anticipation of battle. Kelbahal intended to sway the planet's population to his side. However, this task proved more challenging than they expected, for there remained cities untouched by tainted code, connected by the more secure technological digital network known as the Noosphere. Though the first shots had been fired and Magos Maximal's reactors destroyed, Kelbahal still required a pretext to commence a planetary war. Therefore, his allies attempted to provoke those unwilling to join them, using various acts of sabotage, murder, and direct aggression. One example of such tactics was the incident with Legio Mortis, who invaded House Tempestus territory and attempted to provoke a fire while maintaining complete radio silence. Meanwhile, in the magma-forged city of adept Coriel Zeth, a technology known as the Akashic Reader was being developed, a device capable of extracting knowledge from the warp. The mechanism had been created, but its operation required an enormous amount of psychic energy. Such a quantity could only be obtained from the Astronomicon during the mutual alignment of Mars and Terra. Coincidentally, this occurred at the same time Kelbahal and Regulus opened the vaults of Moravec. The Akashic Reader proved unable to channel such an amount of psychic energy due to a flaw in its design, and the Emperor's energy flooded the magma city, shielding it from all attacks begotten by the chaos of the scrap code. Coriel Zeth promptly renounced his ideals and declared his loyalty to the Imperium, and Kelbahal branded her a renegade and commenced war. Coriel Zeth, Ipluvian Maximal, and Zagreus Cain emerged as leaders in resisting the forces of the traitors. Later, history would record that the first strike was made against the forge of Magos Matthias Kefra in the region of the Sabi Bay in the Medler crater. Titans of the Legio Magna emerged from the southern region of the land of Nu and shattered the gates of his city within minutes. Crowned with flaming horned skulls, the machines roamed between the high slopes of the crater like the possessed, obliterating all life and laying waste with firearms to the results of millennia of scientific endeavors. The indescribable carnage continued until nightfall, until the last books burned and the vast library and armament workshops were reduced to heaps of charred metal. Further north, in the land of Arabia, the massive machine engineering plants of High Magos Ahotep suffered bombardment from hundreds of atomic missiles launched from secret silos in the scattered peaks of the Nile Sirte Mountains. Explosions of forbidden weaponry filled a crater 415 meters wide with billows of raging flame, raising a nuclear mushroom cloud 70 kilometers into the sky. And along the border between the lunar swamp and Arcadia, Heated disputes erupted into full-scale war when Princeps Ulrich of the Deathstalkers launched his engines in an attack on the fortress of the Death Arrows, commanded by Max and Vledig. Taken by surprise, the Death Arrows lost 19 machines in the first hour of the battle, and then retreated to the icy expanses of the Boreal Sea, eventually finding cover among the dunes of Olympia. Their calls for aid went unanswered as the fiery storm of war engulfed the entire Red Planet. Amidst the teardrop-shaped hills of the Athabasca Valley, the war machines of Legio Ignatum and the Burning Stars clashed in a merciless combat. Neither side could claim victory, and the battle raged throughout the night. By dawn, both legions withdrew. Hordes of corrupted Scitarii and servitors, transformed into horrid weapons, surged forward into the fray. The initial waves were repelled, but within hours the forge was encircled and came under incessant bombardment by ordinators and colossal siege engines, grotesquely altered in the weapon forges of the Fabricator General. The greatest human casualties occurred around Lake Yemen when the glacial forges of Adept Ruin Vilna were struck from the air by missiles loaded with a mutated strain of the Life-Eater virus. The insatiable virus leapt from one victim to another, annihilating tens of thousands within minutes of the explosion. In the 3 hours that followed, the virus multiplied in the air to such an extent that it wiped out the millions residing in the Dataranil Mountains region, spreading through sensory networks and infecting even those who believed themselves safe behind airtight barriers. 7 hours later, the malevolent virus consumed itself, leaving no living soul in the vicinity of Lake Yemen. The decomposing remains of 14 million bodies lay frozen where they fell. In the deep Herschel crater of the Tyrrhenian Sea, 900,000 Scitarii and protectors engaged in a bloody, chaotic skirmish, the battle persisting for 9 uninterrupted hours until nearly all participants were dead. This conflict held no defined objective. Both factions merely exhausted their resources in a pointless, bloody grinder, neither willing to retreat. Battles raged not only on the surface of Mars, as the giant shipyards encircling the Red Planet with the shimmering silver crown were engulfed in a chain of explosions due to suddenly flaring hostilities. Loyalists and renegades battled each other with the fervor of deranged fanatics. Line fleet ships departed harbor, and Mechanicum vessels fired upon each other with all their armaments, disregarding tactics and survival. Clouds of gas erupted from breaches in the hulls, bodies spilled out, wreckage of ships pierced the atmosphere like fiery arrows. Enveloped in flames, the Mechanicum Glorium, having been deprived of its engines in a battle against several frigates, penetrated the dense layers of the atmosphere and plunged toward the surface of Mars. The tech theologians who witnessed its descent gathered in the Basilica of the Blessed Algorithm and raised their mechadendrites in prayer for appeasement. The plea to end the cruelty and return to calm was transmitted on every communication channel and rolled across Mars. Yet, the Mechanicum Glorium, crashing onto the Basilica, interrupted the broadcast, obliterating in an instant the vast complex of temples, chapels, and tombs. The shockwave spread across millions of square kilometers, annihilating millions of devout priests. The final plea to heed the voice of reason was buried in the newly formed crater. All across Mars, priceless libraries burned and maddened crowds tore apart the adepts whose wisdom helped humanity transcend the confines of the solar system. Once tightly bound by oaths of loyalty, the forges turned against one another as sworn enemies. The planet's surface was pelted with burning wreckage of ships, and the sky unleashed a fiery storm, as if lamenting the uncontainable cruelty. For those remaining loyal to the Emperor, salvation arrived in the form of a massive Imperial expeditionary fleet. Malcador tasked Rogel Dawn with ensuring the security of Mars's forges for the Imperium's military actions. Dawn dispatched the champion of his legion, the first Captain Sigismund, 4 companies of Imperial Fists, and a significant contingent of the Imperial Guard. Sigismund's companies deployed to Mondus Oculum, while the rest of the expeditionary forces fought across the Martian surface. After rapid deployment under fire in the shadow of the mighty caldera of Pavonis Mons, 13 companies of Saturnine hoplites advanced through the traitors' lines. 2 companies of Imperial Fists and 4 regiments of Jupiterian Grenadiers landed near the complex of the Mondus Gamma Forge, under the command of Captain Camba Diaz. They soon found themselves engaged in a life-and-death struggle within the forge of Mondus Gamma, and the companies of Saturnine hoplites, tasked with breaking the siege of the forge, were repeatedly repelled by horrifically altered creatures. Though the battles were desperate, Camba Diaz eventually captured the stockpiles of power armor and ammunition, yet his company was outnumbered. Lucas Crom's forces pushed Camba Diaz back to the landing zones, inflicting heavy losses. Sigismund soon realized that the Imperial expeditionary forces would not hold the forge as planned. However, a substantial amount of essential supplies had already been retrieved and prepared for transport to Terra. Sigismund's squads descended upon Mondus Oculum, uncertain if they would face conflict, but were relieved to discover that Zagreus Cain remained true to the Imperium. Sigismund secured an enormous stockpile of munitions for transportation back to Terra, including nearly 12,000 sets of Mark V power armor and twice as many Astartes weapons. Yet, the Loyalists had little time. Despite the fabricator's servitors operating at full capacity, it still proved insufficient, for Sigismund's void ship had sent word of the approach of vast enemy forces consisting of infantry, armoured units, Scitari, and at least 2 legions of traitor titans totaling approximately 60 god machines. The desire harboured by Sigismund to unleash bloody vengeance upon the heretics' heads battled with the understanding of the necessity to complete the mission and secure the evacuation of vital armour packs from the forges of Zagreus Cain. Reluctantly, he realized he must remain loyal to his mission, for the enemies were too numerous, and his orders permitted no futile acts of defiance. Zagreus Cain alerted the first captain that should both forges fall, the Imperium would have no significant means to replenish the combat losses sustained by the Loyalists. And within hours, Mondus Oculum and Mondus Gamma were ablaze, with much of their industrial equipment destroyed. Like comets, the Imperial landing craft hurtled toward the heavens, their motherships in orbit. Transport vessels vied in the skies, hastening to leave Mars. Thanks to the desperate actions of the Loyalists, tens of thousands of power armor suits and other vital materials which would play their roles in the campaign against the traitor legions were extracted from the surface. While the transports evacuated Mars, a battle for the Loyalists' last stronghold raged below. Kelbahal's minions had to exert considerable effort to breach Magma City, defended by the Knights of Taranis and the Titans of Legio Tempestus. Understanding that aid from Terra would no longer come, they resolved to sell their lives dearly. The god machines of Legio Mortis advanced into battle, hoping for an easy victory, but most were forever laid to rest in the Red Sands, thanks to the efforts of the external emitters of the Titan Deus Tempestus. However, it too fell in battle. In its final moments, it witnessed the heroic charge of its comrades. After the death of the Knights of Taranis and Deus Tempestus, resistance was utterly broken. The Scitarii of Mortis breached the landing pads and devastated hives, flooding the city. They killed every soldier they encountered and captured the adepts. The remnants of Malgatar's battered army gathered under the serpent-headed banner of the warlord and stormed the city streets through now unguarded gates. An uncontrolled slaughter and riots commenced, and the renegades failed to notice the looming danger until it was too late. The artillerymen still shelled the few districts that continued resisting the conquerors. The ground trembled beneath the feet, and buildings collapsed, but it was not explosion blasts causing it. Somewhere in the heart of her forge, Coriel Zeth issued her final command, opening the volcano's floodgates and disengaging the power shields embedded in the planet's crust, which upheld the streets of the Magma City. The molten magma began to devour the adamantium columns. Initially the process was slow, but as the columns thinned, their destruction accelerated. A prolonged screech echoed with deafening thunder, causing the invaders to pause their plundering and look up to the sky in fear. The wide silver road in front of the temple split, and fountains of lava shot up from the crack. The entire city began to sway. The moan of tearing metal and the crash of collapsing houses became the forge's death knell, echoed by the desperate screams of the traitors. The aqueducts could not withstand the weight and spewed molten torrents which crept through the streets, claiming the lives of thousands of monstrous Skitarii and warp-enhanced protectors. Soon the entire city was engulfed in flames. Magma incinerated everything combustible and melted the rest. Within an instant, thousands of invaders and city inhabitants perished, though for the latter this swift death turned out to be a mercy. The road split down the middle, and a kilometre-long slab of rock dragged along in the lava flow at least 10,000 people together with war machines. The gates of the volcano, which had guarded the city entrance for 1,000 years, collapsed and fragmented into thousands of pieces. In the future, they would become the only testimony of the city's existence. Thousands attempted to escape the city via the landing platform, where the tempestuous titans were fighting their last battle, but the fallen aqueduct deprived them of this opportunity. An entire ocean of lava spilled onto the surface, and those who managed to flee perished from unbearable heat and poisonous gases. Only the titan Aquila Ignis survived, for the princeps turned the machine and attempted to escape the deadly stream. However, it managed only 5 more steps before its legs melted to the knee joints. The grand machine was felled by the planet's own fury, and its immense body shattered upon crashing into the hard rocks. The upper bastions broke free of their moorings, the cockpit was crushed under its own weight, and after the fall only the infernal storm cannon remained intact. The lava continued to rise, and within an hour the magma city was bereft of any living soul. 3 hours after the adept Coriel Zeth decided the fate of her forge, the magma city was entirely submerged in a vast lake of lava. Following the battle for Mars, Imperial forces blockaded the planet, and it remained under the control of the dark Mechanicum until the conclusion of the battle for Terra. However, skirmishes on the surface of Mars did not cease. After the departure of Dawn's sons, the Magos loyal to the ideals of the Omnissiah mutilated themselves, tearing augmetic ports and interfaces from their flesh. They became immune to the effects of scrap code and continued to defend from the ruins of their forges. Amidst the frozen deserts, disparate soldiers attacked enemy convoys and disappeared into the shadows. Skirmishes often flared up in narrow cargo corridors and abandoned buildings in hive cities. In the surviving secret hideouts, the tech priests' leaders attempted to find a way to reverse the effects of the scrap code. The survivor Zagreus Kane was appointed the new Fabricator General and, while on Terra, attempted several times to persuade Rogel Dawn and Malkador to recapture Mars. After the conclusion of the Horus Heresy, a great purge followed, and the traitors were cast into the Eye of Terror. However, the loss of such irreplaceable technologies and valuable knowledge that were stored within the sacred forges of Mars would affect the Imperium for many millennia. For with the last towers of the magma city sinking into the lake of molten lava, the dreams of elevating the Imperium to a golden age of scientific progress also vanished. Humanity had not known such a state since its very inception. The next battle we shall discuss today involves the events on the distant world of Canopus. No news of the war, of the terrible betrayal that had occurred, or of the blood-soaked battles between brothers reached the defenders of its enormous refineries, only ominous silence. By the order of Sanguinius, the greatest angel himself, about 2,000 members of the 9th Legion became the guardians of Canopus. Bound by honor, they were to hold the world, forsaking their duty, and seek answers among the stars, where they believed the crusade continued unabated. It was a stale and desolate place, yet it could not last forever, for the flames of the Horus Heresy were spreading ever wider, engulfing all the worlds of the galaxy. Months turned into years, and the 8th year of the 31st millennium began without contact from any part of the Imperium. No word came from the Great Angel, and no Imperial fleet arrived to claim the precious wealth of the refineries, and Praetor Amaranthus began to worry. His orders forbade the garrison from abandoning their post, but it did not prohibit the sending of astropathic messages. And through these, they sought any news from the Imperial forces capable of replying. What came in response to the Blood Angel's appeal brought neither answers nor assistance, for it was not the reinforcing forces of the 9th Legion or Imperial fleet that appeared on Canopus, but the armadas of the black ships of the Iron Hands. The warships of the 10th Legion arrived under the roar of guns, fully prepared for battle. They did not come as brothers in arms and veterans of the Great Crusade, but as warriors hardened by betrayal and aggressive from blood and loss. Ready for war, they approached Canopus, beasts forged in the battle for Istvan, seeking to replenish their losses by any means. There was but one message sent to Canopus and its defenders, a message which gave no answers. We will not let the traitor win, no trust will be given, for the blood of the Gorgon cools on the black soil of Istvan. Surrender or die. Shuttles of dark iron descended upon Canopus, disgorging the warriors of the Iron 10th onto the scorched, cratered wasteland that bordered the vast equatorial refineries. Row upon row of grim space marines stood, their flesh and armor scarred from the battles on Istvan III and the harsh punishments they had inflicted upon themselves. They were filled with bitter fury due to their defeats, which compelled them to face the Blood Angels not as potential allies but as enemies. As proof of their grim resolve, they bore not only their traditional armaments, but also more than a dozen nuclear devices, weapons of last hope and terrifying power. Praetor Amaranthus, surrounded by 2 stern angels in scarlet ebonite armor and a small honor guard, personally approached the numerous ranks of Iron Hands, but his diplomatic efforts were rejected. Before he reached the front lines of the Iron Hands, warning salvos from plasma cannons stopped his retinue. Their message was clear. The Iron Hands were not interested in negotiations. The Blood Angels must surrender the world they defended in the name of Sanguinius, or a fratricidal battle would commence. Nestled in the heart of the Iron Hands formation, guarded by Morlock Terminators, Ironfather Carrick regarded the Blood Angels' attempts to negotiate as yet another ruse. A ruse devised by traitors to lure his brothers into another ambush, another massacre. The Iron Father had personally walked the blood plains of Istvan V, where the ground was littered with the corpses of his brothers, and he vowed never to allow such a tragedy again. Maintaining a semblance of honor, he gave the Blood Angels some time, after which his warriors would restore the honor of Ferrus Manus by claiming victory to erase the failure he endured on Istvan V. Along the low, weapon-encrusted walls of the refineries, warriors in scarlet armor took their positions, readying all their weaponry. Praetor Amaranthus found no joy in the battle that now seemed inevitable. Unable to attack those he should call brothers, so he waited, finding solace in the fulfillment of his duty. Unaware of the pain tormenting the Iron Hands, he saw only the bitter hatred that drove them forward to the awaiting blades of his warriors. As if summoned by his dread, a phalanx of iron terminators, the surviving Morlocks, numbering in the hundreds, moved towards the walls, chanting somber battle songs, followed by thousands more of their lesser brethren. Now no words could restrain their rage, and as Praetor Amaranthus witnessed the irrational spectre unfolding before him, bright and dreadful explosions bloomed among the dense ranks of Iron Hands. Warriors in dull iron armor were torn apart by the blasts, leaving bloody gaps in the advancing phalanx, yet the weapons of the Blood Angels made not a sound. Squadron after squadron, the sea-green warships and assault craft broke through the turbulent skies of Canopus, with blazing laser beams and missile contrails serving as their vanguard, inflicting severe damage on the Iron Hands in the wastelands below. Sheltered by the factory walls' fortifications, the Blood Angels suffered no harm from the sudden arrival of another legion, intent on destroying their battle brothers. Yet they found no solace in watching the sons of Ferrus Manus perish under the blows of the sons of Horus. Crashing into the harsh mud of Canopus, the storm eagles unleashed the ferocious warriors, the devastators of Horus. Their fury was met without hesitation by the Iron Hands, who rushed forward to engage their hated foe in combat. The wasteland around the great processing plant now transformed into a seething melee, where warriors clashed like waves in a raging storm. The warships circled overhead, spewing fire into the maelstrom below. But the Iron Hands did not yield. The sons of Horus brought forth more warriors who pressed ever harder against their enemy, yet the sons of Medusa continued to fight, indifferent to their fate. The battle for Canopus might as well have been decided at that moment when the Iron Hands were consumed by their own wrath, and the Blood Angels isolated, if not for the arrogance of the sons of Horus. Their leader, Ishka-Sekuha, attacked without warning, sealing his brethren to their inevitable death without hope of surrender. Finally, the guns of the processing plant roared in fury, their shells striking down the aircraft of the sons of Horus, as the gates groaned open wide to release an echelon of Baal's warriors into the heart of the fray. The Blood Angels pierced the outer ranks of the sons of Horus like a spear and plunged into the heart of battle. At the spearhead were the Ophanemes, driven to cold rage and the thought that the legions of Adeptus Astartes could engage openly against their kin. They punished betrayal wherever it was found. The Ophanemes sought champions among the ranks of the sons of Horus and tested the strength of their treacherous confidence in battle. They ground the pride of the traitors into the dust, and faced with the combined assault of the Iron Hands and Blood Angels, the vanguard of the sons of Horus retreated across the wastelands. Yet this was but a minor victory, as long as they battled on the ground. The sons of Horus had repulsed the Iron Hands' ships from orbit and now prepared to land 3 whole companies of the Astartes Legion, bolstered by thousands of auxiliaries warriors. The banner of the Eye of Horus flew above them without any sign of the imperial Aquila. They openly declared themselves rebels and traitors, unafraid of the garrison's wrath. In the face of such force, only the united remnants of the Iron Hands and Blood Angels could together hold Canopus for the Emperor. But Iron Father Carrick and his brothers trusted no one but themselves. When the Blood Angels returned behind the fortifications of the manufactory, the Iron Hands ventured into the wastelands, choosing to secure their nuclear warheads, instead embarking on their own blood war within the dunes and weed-choked forests, which concealed them from orbital scanners. From the parapets of the fortress, Amanthus witnessed their valor, though he lamented the stubborn pride that doomed them all. When his lightning attack was thwarted, Ishka-Sekuha of the sons of Horus commenced siege operations to claim his prize for the War Master. The riches of Canopus were vital for the war. As intact they could nourish 100 fleets, yet destroyed they would serve as a grim reminder of the cost of disobedience. Auxiliaries toiled, digging trenches in the caustic mud and erecting siege engines, while the sons of Horus engaged the scarlet-clad warriors atop the walls with nemesis bolters, mortars and artillery from afar. Horus's warriors had no desire to expend resources on futile assaults against the high walls, nor did the Blood Angels have the numbers to eradicate the traitors were they to attempt a sally. Days passed, and for every fallen angel within the fortress, another traitor corpse was left on the wastelands, a grim stalemate the fewer-numbered loyalists could not offset. As guns roared and vigilant snipers exchanged fire, the Iron Hands finally sought to enact their desired vengeance. Emerging from the depths of the wastelands, they launched raids against the siege fortifications, tearing through the engineers and masters of the auxiliaries' army, turning them into a mash of congealed blood and flesh. Such raids managed to delay the massive armies of the traitors like pinpricks upon the hide of a juggernaut. The death toll among Horus's servants was high, yet they gladly paid this price to seize Canopus intact. The divided loyalist forces, numbering a mere 2,000 combined, could not stem Horus, who was soon ready to strike. Massive sea-green war machines advanced upon the walls of the manufactory. Assault squads poised once more for genuine slaughter. The cadence of 1,000 space marines marching to war was such that the dust they kicked up in the wastelands turned day into night. It seemed to the defenders of Canopus that their end had come. The Blood Angels assembled along the walls, grim and resolute, all veterans well versed in the savage prowess of their foe. They knew no mercy could be expected. Guns barked from both sides as armoured turrets on tracks began their journey across the wastelands to the walls, shelters for the warriors within against shells and bullets. The siege weapons of the traitors punched several holes in the walls to suppress the defenders. However, they were quite careful not to damage the processing plant itself. Under cover of the guns' fire, the siege engines reached the walls, and the traitors' weapons fell silent completely, apparently to allow their brethren to attack, and the sons of Horus stormed onto the narrow parapets, where they were already awaited by warriors clad in scarlet armour. For an hour, groups of warriors, marked with the Eye of Horus, attempted to break through the ranks of angels on the walls. Wherever the defence was breached, they annihilated the attackers in a barrage of powerful striking blades, their unwavering ferocity inspiring the warriors around them again and again. The initial assault was thwarted, and the sons of Horus retreated from the walls, intending to punish the defiant Blood Angels with their guns, and began regrouping for a second attack. But the guns suddenly fell silent, and instead of the roar of artillery, there came only the war cries that crashed down upon the exhausted traitors. Having routed the artillery crews, the Iron Hands charged into the rear of the sons of Horus with a thirst for blood and vengeance. The command post directing the assault on the walls fell within minutes, its defences breached by gravitational blasts, and the defenders scattered by relentless Morlock terminators. Chieftain Sekuha lost an arm, barely surviving the fury of the Iron Warriors. He was retrieved from the battlefield, and his defeat signalled the retreat of the sons of Horus. However, they were Space Marines, and even in retreat they fought. Each squad moved while covering another, managing to withdraw, albeit with losses. On the walls, the Blood Angels celebrated the enemy's retreat, echoing the songs of their grim brethren in honour of their victory. Amaranthus met the Iron Father amidst the ruins of the sons of Horus's command post, where the master of the Iron Hands had draped an enemy banner over himself like a cloak, and they recommitted to their alliance. All around lay bodies in grey iron armour, and further in the rear the sons of Horus were regrouping again, their numbers exceeding both loyalist forces. Amaranthus made a simple blood oath with the Iron Hands. Together they would pay tribute to Ferrus Manus. Every enemy would be defeated in his honour. Every drop of spilled blood would be in memory of his sacrifice. A simple nod from the Iron Father sealed this oath, and the Iron Hands joined their new allies on the wall. Bound by blood and vows, the Loyalists held on for 4 long months. Reinforced by numbers and weaponry, the Iron Hands became formidable defenders, forcing the enemy to shift from siege to a single large-scale but risky assault, in which the traitors could be broken. Yet with each attack, defenders faced severe losses, and fewer warriors were able to hold the walls. Despite their valour, the tide of enemies showed no sign of weakening. No call for help received a response. The defenders did not know if they remained the last bastion of the Imperium standing firm against the traitors. Perhaps even Terra had already fallen while they still fought. By the end of the 8th year of the 31st millennium, barely 100 defenders remained, and Amaranthus was so grievously wounded that he could scarcely stand or continue the fight. This was the end for the valiant garrison of Canopus. Rather than conclude their struggle with defeat, Iron Father Carrack proposed an alternative, a sacrifice worthy of the Gorgon himself. They placed 14 nuclear warheads throughout the facility in such a way that they would detonate sequentially, destroying the plant and all those nearby. Amaranthus, nearly dead from his wounds, ascended his post atop the wall one last time, flanked by his most loyal warriors. All other defenders stood guard over the warheads. In their final battle to mark their demise, the Blood Angels and Iron Hands stood as one amidst the canyons of the massive factory. Detecting the energy signature of atomic weaponry, the Sons of Horus unleashed the full might of their forces upon the defenders, no longer holding back as the Loyalists threatened their prize for which so much blood had already been shed. Leader Sekuha, whose right hand had now become a prosthetic of bronze and ceramic, personally led the assault. His Terminator bodyguards captured the Blood Angels' watchpost in an hour that Amranthus defended until the last. The final son of Baal atop the wall. Ishka Sekuha decapitated the angel, eager to take the skull as a trophy, while his warriors infiltrated the plant itself. There, amidst the labyrinthine passageways and vast canyons, the Loyalists fought their last battle. Scattered throughout the facility, dozens of squads fought to confuse and delay the enemy until the warheads could be armed. Alone Ophanim held one intersection for 20 minutes, slaying 3 Sons of Horus champions in duels before a dreadnought tore him in half, and a dozen Morlocks briefly retook a watchpost in a desperate attack that ended only when 3 Vindicator siege tanks demolished the tower where they had taken refuge. The blood of heroes, each unknown and long forgotten, was trampled underfoot by the Sons of Horus as they advanced toward the heart of the colossal plant. 9 warheads were seized by the Sons of Horus intact. Their defenders perished in a fierce fight, while 3 more were destroyed by precise neutron beam laser strikes. Efforts to defuse the captured devices were slowed by Iron Hand snipers, who lay well concealed as enemy forces passed them by, awaiting the second wave, which included enemy tech marines. In the final act of sacrifice, Iron Father Carrack, along with the remnants of the Morlocks and the Crimson Paladins, launched a suicidal assault, charging into the heart of enemy positions. There he once again confronted leader Sekuha, and the champion of the Sons of Horus called upon his warriors to shield him, stalling the enemy's advance. The warriors of the Iron Father laid down their lives for the chance to punish the Sons of Horus. Of the 30 warriors who went into battle, only 2 remained alive when Carrack reached the chieftain and his bodyguards. Carrack fought with a fury as though he were already dead. Wielding his massive hammer, he tore the augmentation from the traitor's shoulder, causing him to recoil in agony. The warlord of the Sons of Horus, left with only his combi bolter, fired a melter charge point-blank, which pierced the enemy's Terminator armor and left his smouldering body on the ground. The Sons of Horus gathered around, summoned to aid their master, and bore witness to the last words of the Iron Father. Chieftain Sekuha tore the lost battle standard from the remnants of Carrack's armor, and victory seemed to be within his grasp. Yet Carrack still did not stop laughing, and he continued to laugh as the explosion of the first warhead rolled through the complex, shaking the earth with its fury. Revenge had finally been fulfilled, and it was executed in the name of Ferrus Manus. In a series of titanic explosions, the warheads tore the factory apart, eviscerating it and rendering it useless for the traitors. Only a few scattered bands of the Sons of Horus managed to escape the explosion and return to their ships. The battle for Canopus was over. Perhaps not a victory for its brave defenders, but clearly something less than a simple defeat. And lastly for today, though not the least in importance, we shall discuss the battle for Nirkon. The Garmin star cluster is situated at a strategically vital crossroads on the edge of the Masalar segmentum. Encompassing over 30 inhabited worlds, the cluster's systems served as havens for many crucial institutions of the Imperium, as well as repositories for vast stockpiles of munitions supplying the ongoing Great Crusade. Moreover, these worlds were home to Mechanicum, proving grounds and training bases, and orbital shipyards capable of servicing multiple fleets simultaneously. The primary system of the Beta Garmin cluster consists of 2 worlds, the greatest of which, Beta Garmin II, is the industrial heart of the cluster and became one of the most infamous battlefields of the Horus heresy. 3 years after the devastating conflict that engulfed the Garmin cluster, The warship Salamander Ebony Dragon emerged into reality at the periphery of the Beta Garmin system. Moving through the contested space above Beta Garmin 2, it transmitted no identification codes and ignored threats emanating from both loyalists and traitors. The ship continued its course towards the capital, the fortress city of Nurkon City. Inside the ship, with weapons ready, followers of the Flame awaited their moment, led by Cassian Dracos, whose prophetic visions had guided the Salamander to this heavily scarred region. Without making any attempts to engage in battle, the ship's weapons were decommissioned and silently gazed into the void. The dragon ship pushed its engines to the limit to maneuver between the transport ships belonging to Legio Mortis and spewed a swarm of warships and dropships before retreating to the edge of the system, away from the skirmish. The Salamander's ship, the Ebony Dragon, set off from Nocturne in the early days of the Horus Heresy, in search of any news regarding Vulcan and the forces that accompanied him in battle against the traitors at Istvan V. Under the command of Chaplain Lieutenant Giafas Jur, this vessel became embroiled in several notable events throughout their winding journey to Istvan. On the planet, the ship's crew restored the damaged sarcophagus of the dreadnought Cassian Dracos, former master of the 18th Legion, and learned of the fate that befell their brethren. Subsequently, Cassian Dracos began experiencing prophetic visions, and although Giafas Jur remained the nominal commander of the ship, it was increasingly Cassian Dracos who dictated the course. The crew began to refer to themselves as the Followers of the Flame, burning their armor to black and adorning it with images of their genetic forefather as a sign of their devotion to their cause. The followers continued to strike at the holdings of the traitors wherever they could, but as the flames of the civil war raged hotter, the attacks of the Ebony Dragon became less intertwined with the loyalist raids, and more directed by the prophecies of the former Legion Master. On the war-torn surface of Beta Garmin II, a loyalist offensive led by a large detachment of Imperial Fists faltered and turned into a war of attrition. A counterattack under the command of a millennial from the Emperor's Children, alongside an indeterminate number of Alpha Legionnaires, repelled the loyalist advance, threatening to drive them out of the vital city of Nurkon, just as the warships of the Followers of the Flame descended from the skies. Framed by the setting sun, the newcomers targeted the loyalist command signals received from the warring factions below. But since neither side was certain of the origins of the newcomers, the warships of the Followers, discovering a wide gap in the traitors' flank, held by only a few artillery and auxiliary units of the Alpha Legion, dove down to unleash their contents onto the crater-pocked roadway. Warriors in power armor, clad in various livery of the Followers, leapt from their transports and immediately upon landing on the ground, with weapons gleaming, began to carve through the Alpha Legion units stranded in the open, clearing a landing zone for a single richly ornamented Thunderhawk. Emerging from the warship, Cassian Dracos, along with a squad of his most zealous followers, charged into the ranks of the traitors. There, Dracos was crushing and incinerating figures in azure armor wherever he could find them, as they struggled to aim their heavy weaponry at him, which was problematic at such close range. Giafas Jur directed his forces to clear key structures bypassed by the dreadnought's destructive frenzy, incinerating traitors with bursts of flame, thus securing a landing zone for the remaining forces. Once the beachhead was secured, heavy transports of the Followers descended, disgorging from their depths assault tanks of the Predator, Rhino and Land Raider classes, before retreating to safety once again. Now, with their attacks supported by heavy machinery, the Followers could push back the reorganized forces of the traitors with a barrage of azure discharges and explosive missiles. With his enemy now in disarray, the commanding officer of the Imperial Fists, Castellan Learmund Thol, acted swiftly. Dispatching a cohort of allied Mechanicum to support the Followers of the Flame, Thol withdrew his forces from their defensive positions, driving several wedges into the chaotic ranks of the traitors. The presence of a contingent of Iron Warriors, led by warsmith Narik Draeger among the followers, along with religious frescoes, totems and scriptures inscribed on their modified armour, aroused both alarm and suspicion among the forces under Thal's command, particularly among the salamanders in his ranks. But the followers' loyalty had been proven through deeds. Thal attempted to communicate with the leaders of the followers, but received no response from Cassian Dracos or Siaphus Jur, only a brief acknowledgement from Narik Draeger. Thal watched in bewilderment as the newcomers advanced forward, defying all military logic, continuing to pursue the traitors instead of fortifying the loyalist positions. Unwilling to lose momentum, yet wary of overstretching the defensive line, the Castellan reluctantly ordered his forces to halt. Despite Thal's repeated urgings, the followers persisted in their pursuit, furthermore joined by several squads of salamanders who ignored his orders and sought to reunite with their brethren and former legion master. At the vanguard of this rebellious army stood several maniples of automaton Mechanicum who, heedless of their controlling Magos's commands, tore through the ranks of the traitors with a ferocity that contradicted the cold logic that once governed them. This ragtag horde of warriors, automatons and war machinery, now numbering nearly 1,500, moved as one under the banners of the followers, ignoring Castellan Leomanthal's demands to hold positions and venting the hatred for the enemy that Cassian Dracos ignited in their hearts. As night descended upon Nircon, the followers had already advanced deep into the southern regions of the city, though no loyalist observer could discern their ultimate goal there, aside from the destruction of traitors. In response, the Alpha Legion dispatched several elite operatives, known as Ifrits, to attempt to slow the enemy's advance. Many of the forward reconnaissance units of the followers suddenly found their communications with other allies severed, only to be gunned down at close range by lurking legionnaires of the 20th Legion. Others were slowed by gravitational traps or minefields. Yet despite all these attempts to distract or disorient them, the followers continued their resolute advance south until they reached the final station of the technical railway, Nircon City. When Dracos's forces were divided by vast technical canopies and directed along the railway tracks, the Alpha Legion seized the opportunity and struck back. A firestorm erupted among the formations of the followers. Pre-targeted artillery rained down a barrage of shells upon them, and phantom figures appearing in the maintenance hangars opened fire. Cybernetic automata silently encircled Dracos, shielding him with their bodies even as missiles and volleys from Lascannons thinned their ranks. The followers did not falter even when rhinos and land raiders exploded around them, for their purpose was affirmed by the prophecies of their nominal leader. Flames burned bright in the darkness, illuminating the hidden foes as squads of followers, fervent warriors armed with powerful combi flamers, burst into nearby buildings. Withstanding the torrent of firepower unleashed upon them, they pressed forward, incinerating traitors with volleys of burning promethium. Over the ensuing hours, a stalemate emerged, evolving into a battle of attrition. While the majority of the followers' forces were isolated from one another, some managed to hold out, gathering in machine depots and establishing improvised defensive positions. Desperate squads of followers repeatedly reported attacks led by a richly adorned dreadnought of the Alpha Legion, whose mighty fists easily breached loyalist defences and tore through their armour. Seizing the chance to deliver a symbolic blow, Cassian Dracos attempted to confront this warrior. Yet, perhaps forewarned by its brethren, the dreadnought would withdraw every time, vanishing into the darkness only to strike again from a different direction. Unable to vent his fury, and with reports from Siaphus Jur and other officers about mounting losses and dwindling ammunition, Dracos made a decisive move. He led his dwindling contingent of warriors to the nearest potential escape route, a large technical tunnel leading to the underground network of the Maglev Railway, and ordered other officers to rendezvous with him there. Although none could say how Dracos had discovered this sanctuary, all trusted his judgment, and were eager to carry out his will. The Alpha Legion, which had previously been content with conserving its strength and striking at the enemy from the shadows, realized that the trapped foe might break free and directed all its forces in a unified onslaught to encircle him once more. The advance of the pursued followers quickly devolved into rearguard skirmishes, with squads retreating instinctively, covering one another and laying down suppressive fire, striving to fend off the attackers and retrieve their wounded or fallen brothers. Some found themselves cut off from their comrades, their officers eliminated by precise shots from the Alpha Legion operatives armed with deadly nemesis bolters. Moreover, the Vox communication inexplicably disappeared as well. Meanwhile, others plunged into the fray amidst the darkness and chaos with broken blades and clenched fists, with depleted bolters, holding the merciless enemy at bay and buying precious seconds for their brethren. Despite the carnage unfolding around him, Cassian Dracos remained unperturbed, urging his men to press forward. Rallying around their leader, the followers of the flame laid aside the bodies of their fallen, relentlessly advancing toward the promised refuge, purchasing each step with their blood. As their forces gathered at the entrance to the maintenance tunnel, its revealed entry broad enough to admit even the remaining followers' machinery, Draco surveyed the assembled legionaries. Fewer than 500 of his followers stood beside him. He remained to hold off the Alpha Legion forces at the entrance with sporadic volleys as his forces retreated into the tunnels, urged on by the wounded Shearfus Jur and Narek Drager, when he finally beheld his enemy. In the light of bonfires with glimmering weapons appeared a pair of identical Alpha Legion Contemptor dreadnoughts. Advancing with an erratic gait, they closed in on the fleeing loyalists, targeting their weapons at Dracos. Sensing an opportunity to atone for his previous failure, Cassian Dracos turned to face them. As Dracos approached, one of the traitor dreadnoughts seemed to completely power down, as if the mere presence of Cassian was enough to cause the bundles of electrical fibers in the traitor's limbs to cease functioning and to diminish the power of its reactor. As the light in its helmet lenses dimmed, the massive figure of the dreadnought suddenly crashed into the ceramite support beside the tunnel entrance before collapsing onto the cratered earth. The other dreadnought staggered but kept its footing, then crashed its iron body directly into Dracos, knocking him back into the tunnel. Lesser warriors dashed for safety as the dreadnoughts clashed with each other, destroying ceramite supports in their attempts to deal a decisive blow to the enemy. When cracks began to run along the walls and ceiling, Dracos triumphantly tore off the clawed hand of his foe, thrusting his power fist into the shattered armor to snatch out the pilot. Activating the heavy flamer built into his fist, Dracos incinerated his enemy, then cast the remains down to the ground. Seeing that the last of his warriors reached a safe spot, Dracos staggered into the tunnel's depths, heavy bolter shells bursting through his armor from behind. His weapon ran out of ammunition and sparks flew from his damaged engines, but still, Dracos managed to reach the final support and, with a swing of his clawed fist, brought it down. With a deafening crash, dust and rubble of rockcrete rained down, and the ceiling at the tunnel's entrance began to sag. As Dracos limped back into the darkness, the Alpha Legion dreadnought, rendered inoperative at battle's onset, started to rise before the ceiling finally gave way under the immense weight of the city above and collapsed upon the dreadnought with hundreds of tons of rockcrete. As muffled explosions signaled its demise, and the entrance was sealed with falling debris, the followers of the flame vanished beneath the city. Friends, our journey today is concluded. Yet the echoes of the war that erupted during the Horus Heresy will resonate eternally. These are the chronicles that forever reshaped the face of the galaxy and the fate of the Imperium. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell to not miss new stories of the grim future of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. Share your thoughts in the comments. Which of these battles struck you the most, and about which events from the Horus Heresy would you like to learn more? It is quite possible that these events may become the topic of our next video. Thank you for joining me in exploring the grim future of the 41st millennium, where there is no peace, only war. Until our next video, where even more significant events in the history of the Imperium await us, alongside new tales of heroism and betrayal. May the Emperor protect you and guide your steps, for the Emperor and for the Imperium.